Yo, what's going on, YouTube, and welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. It's your boy, Kevin Forte, and we're taking a look today at the New York Islanders, as it sounds like the Islanders could be selling at this year's trade deadline. A little bit of a change of pace for the Islanders, so we'll be getting into that today. So, a recent report from Andy Graziano. From a New York Islanders standpoint, they don't seem to be in a position to make a trade to get back into contention. They should start looking towards the NHL Trade Deadline and moving the contracts of goaltenders Semyon Varlamov and Josh Bailey. They could test the market on forward Cal Clutterbuck and see if they can get a draft pick for him. So, definitely a little bit different than what we've seen really the past 2 years from the New York Islanders. This is a different look in the worst possible way. I think at this point, we're 24 games into the season. You could say there's still 60 games left. But the problem is, after Thanksgiving, and now we're a month after Thanksgiving at this point, once you get to Thanksgiving, I believe it's like 70% of the teams that are in the playoffs at that point will be in the playoffs in April. And I think the Islanders see that math, and they're thinking to themselves, well, at this point, we're 12 points back of a playoff spot. Does it seem feasible for the Islanders at this point? They're a minus 21. They don't have a great team this year. And I think they're starting to realize that. Through 24 games this year, the Islanders are 7-12-5. They've been better of recent, but I really, truly, honestly, it seems like false hope to me. I don't see this team as a playoff team this year, at the very least at this rate. And I think they dug themselves too deep of a hole. Now, with that said, this COVID thing that's going across the rest of the league, the Islanders already dealt with that earlier in the season. So maybe if we start to see some other teams kind of deal with what the Islanders had to deal with COVID, maybe, just maybe, the Islanders have just a slight bit of hope. Just a slight bit, but it's still there. So that is it. If the Islanders want any chance, that this is their last shot. Over the next couple of weeks going into January, they have to win a lot more games than they lose. They pretty much have to win a 3-1 ratio the rest of this month if they want to even consider themselves making the playoffs. Because you saw what they did last night or the other night to the Boston Bruins. They beat a Bruins team that was down a lot of their players. A lot of teams around the league are losing their top players. So there is still some slight hope. Now the problem for the Islanders is too, their goals for and goals against. You guys know I love looking at that stat. Goals for, they have 51 goals for this season. That is 31st in the NHL out of now 32 NHL teams. That's not good. That's really, really bad. That is it sounds normal for the Islanders, but they're never that bad at scoring. They're usually a very opportunistic team that scores when they get the chances. But this season, it's been a whole other level of bad in terms of their 5-on-5 play. Now, recently, they've been able to score on the power play. Here he comes. They're able to score on the power play, yet they're not able to score 5-on-5. They've been able to score on 6-on-5, but they haven't been able to get it done in even strength, and that has been a real Achilles heel for the Islanders this season. You look at their goals against, it's still top 5 in the NHL. 5th best goals against in the NHL. 72 goals against this season. That's pretty good for the Islanders. And like I said, their power play has been kind of up and down, and there's been a lot going on now. Matt Barzal is in COVID. He's still in Detroit. They're still without Ryan Pulock. He is out with an injury, a lower body injury. It's Lou. We're never going to really find out what that injury is. And then you look at their lineup, and it's definitely taken a hit. You have Anthony Beauvillier, Brock Nelson, and Josh Bailey as your first line. That is definitely not what we were expecting, and especially not what we saw on opening night. Anders Lee, Jen Gabriel Pageau, and Oliver Wahlstrom on your second line. We're seeing a little bit more of Austin Czarnik as he centers the third line with Kyle Palmieri and Parise on the wings, and Casey Cizikas centering the fourth line, the identity line of the Islanders with Matt Martin and Cal Clutterbuck. No change there. But like I said, you're seeing maybe a little bit of a dip in their depth scoring. Zach Parise just got his first NHL goal with the Islanders last week against his former team, the New Jersey Devils. Kyle Palmieri's really been struggling. He was supposed to be a top 6 goal scorer. Oliver Wahlstrom just hasn't been getting enough minutes from Barry Trotz. And Anthony Beauvillier, who was on the first line, was scratched the other night, the game before Detroit. So it's just a mixed bag for the Islanders. Josh Bailey, very inconsistent as well. So the Islanders just are not able to get enough goal scoring from the guys on this roster. And that's always been a problem for the Islanders. Now there was some talk, and I just made a video about this, that they may be looking out on the market. There was some talk last summer. They were looking at Arizona Coyotes defenseman Jacob Chychrun. That would be a huge addition for the Islanders. But again, what's the price? It may cost you an Oliver Wahlstrom. It may cost you one of those guys that you want to build around moving forward. And that's where you really got to make that decision, and that could be tough. And then on the forward side of things, they were looking at Patrick Laine up in Columbus. Now, the problem is the Blue Jackets, they probably weren't going to give him to a divisional opponent. There's no reason to do that. So we probably weren't going to see that deal get done. With that said, you look at their defense, there's actually some optimism with the defense. You see Adam Pelech, Scott Mayfield, Zdeno Chara, Noah Dobson, Robin Salo, and Andy Green. Now, we could argue Chara has probably played his last season in the NHL as well as Andy Green. But Robin Salo's actually looked pretty good. He's actually been very reliable under Barry Trotz. Noah Dobson's had a breakout season and is pretty much at this point replaced Nick Leddy, except he's a right-shot defenseman. So there's some optimism there. And there's some young defensemen for the Islanders that they could definitely utilize here over the next couple of years. You're looking at some prospects on the blue line. Samuel Bolduc, Bodie Wild, a former first-round pick or an early second-round pick, and Parker Witherspoon, who's been in the organization for a very long time. I think the Islanders will look at those guys on the blue line to replace guys like Andy Green, guys like Zdeno Chara. And then we look at in between the pipes. I think we could see some change here, and that's really Semyon Varlamov. Varlamov is making $5 million per season till the summer of 2023, which means he has the rest of this season and next. He still has a little bit of time here, and it kind of makes you think there's probably going to be a situation where he needs to get moved. And the reason I say that, too, is the Islanders have a goalie prospect, Jakub Skarek. He's been playing with the Bridgeport Sound Tigers. He's been playing with the ECHL Worcester Railers. He's kind of been all over the place, and I think he would be a nice addition to the New York Islanders in a backup role behind Sorokin next year. Now, the problem is the Islanders are probably going to have to attach an asset, whether that's a second, may have to be a third-round pick, or potentially a first-round pick, to move on from Varlamov's contract. But that is something that is on the table and would free the Islanders up of $5 million worth of cap space. Josh Bailey, kind of in a similar boat, 32 years old, making $5 million per season until the summer of 2024. He's still got 3 years left on that deal. And I think the Islanders realize that he is not producing at the way they would like him to. So is that a contract that ends up going to Arizona next summer? That could definitely be on the table, right? And he will be a nice veteran leader in that organization. And he's a very, he could have an A on his sweater night one for the Coyotes. I apologize, we got a puppy in here. But the Islanders are in kind of that limbo spot. It's like, do you sell everything off? Do you stick with what you have? Like, what's the direction the Islanders need to go? And I think there's just a lot of questions about where they want to go because, again, it depends on how much they rely or how much they really trust their prospects. You look at their forward prospects, they've, drafted pretty well. Otto Koivula would be a good replacement to a guy like Cizikas. He's not as great of a skater as Cizikas. That's really his downfall. We've seen that a little bit this season in the NHL during the whole COVID thing. He's a fairly good player. He gets the puck up along the boards. He wins puck battles. He wins face-offs. He's just not a very good skater. His ability to get back on plays, his ability to be a forward and kind of create pressure on defenses on an odd man rush, you're not really going to see that from Koivula. He's a much more defensive-minded guy. So there could be space for him in the NHL, and maybe he takes a guy like Cal Clutterbuck's spot in the NHL next year. Clutterbuck is on the final year of his contract right now. Blade Jenkins, another guy that the Islanders have drafted. Also, a great fucking name, Blade Jenkins. Damn. Blade Jenkins is a guy that we've heard a little bit about as well, and he kind of fills that same void that we would see from, again, a Casey Cizikas comparable. So Koivula, Jenkins, as well as Arnaud Durando, all three of those guys could potentially take that spot. Also, they have Reese Newkirk. All four of those guys realistically could fill Cal Clutterbuck's spot on the right side, develop as bottom four, as bottom six forwards, and then they could convert to center once they get a little bit older. Once maybe we see Cal Clutterbuck leave, once we see Cizikas leave the organization, and potentially guys like Pajot down the line. Let's be honest, they're also a lot cheaper than some of those guys like Clutterbuck, right? So that is something on the table. Now, more on the offensive skill side of things, guys, that could maybe be top 6 players. The Islanders have Simone Holmstrom. He was kind of a weird draft pick at the time by Lou Lamoriello. He was the 20th pick in 2019? Oh, no. Yeah, in the 2020 NHL draft. He was supposed to be a first overall pick going into that draft. And I think he was under a bad system with his coaching in the season after, the season of his draft year. And I think that really hurt his development. He has gotten